Okay, welcome everyone again to the third AJF Hangout. And this is a very exciting installment as we move to South Asia. Previously, we focused on East Asia and South Africa, and we had some very interesting discussions about the nature of a global art jewelry scene and the way in which what is emerging from non-Western countries in particular offers different ways of thinking about jewelry. And one of the issues that came up in South Africa in particular, if we go back to the previous one, was about what it is to practice contemporary jewelry without the kind of infrastructure such as galleries, collectors, and so on. And we heard from the South African jewelers a very strong sense that jewelry had a powerful voice and role to play in the South African story that was yet to be told. And this is something they saw as being very important. And I think it's interesting to take that to hearing from representatives from South Asia, where there is such an abundance of a jewelry market and scene, but at this stage, relatively few jewelry galleries and collectors. So one of the interests we have is to hear from the jewelers working in South Asia about what it is that they think is important in being a contemporary jeweler. And further on, beyond that, we can look at some of the ways in which contemporary jewelry in South Asia might be different or unique, and how this can be considered. So we're very lucky to have many different time zones represented today. We have Sahr Bashir from Pakistan, but currently in Adelaide. Masuma Sayed, who is in Pakistan at the moment, but is resident in Colombo in Sri Lanka. And Amina Rizwan, who is in Lahore at the moment, just back from the US. Pallavi Gandhi, who is in India at the moment. Hopefully will be able to join us. Ain Aluwalia from Calcutta, whose work is part of this event. You'll have seen images of, who's also joining us, and Aayusha Shrestha from Nepal, who has also posted some very interesting events. So if we could start with you, Sahr, but you could just tell us a little about you and why you think contemporary jewelry is important in Pakistan, where you are.
Thank you, Kevin, for this effort and for having me as part of this much awaited conversation. If any of you don't know me, of course, I am an associate professor and head of the jewelry department at Beacon House National University at the School of Visual Arts and Design in Lahore. So basically, 15 years ago, when I was in Sydney studying for my postgrad and indulging in the actual making of jewelry, I realized how integral it is to get your hands dirty, so to speak. So when the opportunity arose to initiate a formal academic program to understand, engage, and develop the very notions of contemporary jewelry in Pakistan, it was very exciting. There was no doubt that something like this could lead to not only developing the sector, which was undernourished at that moment, and fueling it with new ideas, but also to empower the highly skilled craftspeople who were up till now dependent perhaps only on remaking the time-worn forms and design, or alternately copying from the Western so-called catalogs and crafting hybrid forms, which posed many questions. Um, it was evident that the concept of adornment, the concepts of adornment were shifting, that needs were changing. So in a way, what was envisioned at that moment in time was somehow evolving a model of collaboration, when new modes of thinking, working, um, sort of could inspire the craftsman, and the traditional skills of the craftsman could be imparted to the students in an almost mutual, reciprocal manner. So basically, in a culture, especially in the crafts and jewelry sector, where the hierarchical relationship of the ustad, the mentor, and the shagird, the mentee, that had largely remained unquestioned for many centuries. So it was quite a challenging task. And I think parallel to that, jewelry as an art form was largely an unexplored territory. So, I mean, sure, as we all know, that jewelry was, is, and will be an integral part of our past and our present narratives. But had we nudged the so-called boundaries, or develop or position ourselves within a more contemporary framework to change these perceptions that were underlying, was there a need for an academic and critical inquiry about the meaning and the value of both traditional as well as contemporary jewelry through the process and the practice of making? The historical, the cultural, aesthetic, and the emotional significance of jewelry needed a thorough examination within the context of both current fashion trends or forecasts, and also contemporary discourse in art and design. So basically, this was the premise on which the Department of Jewelry and Accessory Design started at the School of Visual Art, which was the first of its kind to offer a degree, an undergrad degree in this discipline. And this is where my subsequent research and practice took its direction from.
So thank you very much. And it's very interesting to hear you talk about contemporary jewelry as something which questions some of the hierarchies. And I think it seems perhaps a feature in South Asia of the way in which jewelry traditionally is made in terms of the hierarchy between the master and the artisans, or the artist and the workshop. And the contemporary jewelry can open that up is an interesting perspective. But it's good to hear the history of the development of the department too, and to see that this is a very fresh thing. Could we move now to Masuma? And Masuma, you've just recently had an opening of an exhibition of contemporary jewelry in Lahore just a couple of nights ago. So welcome.
Thank you.
And can you tell us a little about yourself and what the role you think contemporary jewelry plays in your practice?
I've been making jewelry since I was an art student in Lahore Art College. So my practice of jewelry making started as an artist and as a very personal expression, not trained as a jewelry designer or jewelry maker even, but I learned the craft of jewelry making, and I developed and evolved during these years, all these years, and learned few more very traditional techniques, and included some of them also in my practice. I was also part of this jewelry department, which Sahar was talking about, and we both raised the department that time. I was looking after the art aspect of it, jewelry as an art form or contemporary jewelry. Um, what did you ask?
In terms of the role that contemporary jewelry plays, do you feel that, what do you think its importance within the creative field that you're working? Why are you interested as an artist to work in jewelry? What does it offer you?
I think personally, I could never separate the idea of jewelry itself from painting, sculpture, or any other art form. I think what inspired me most, and initially until now, were the jewelry tools, the scale, the beauty of the tools, the idea of going to that scale, that intimate scale, where, of course, the dialogue comes in painting and sculpture also. But when you're sitting on a desk and working with the tools, I think that dialogue was very different from the other medium. And the idea of ornamentation also, the idea of adorning yourself, the idea of the public image, the idea of the inside and the outside, and jewelry, to use jewelry as canvas. I think that was the thing which really started me. And just wearing the art on your body, and just to shift the role of again, the hierarchy of the art as uh, painting or sculpture or installation or video or digital art, the whole idea of how the hierarchy comes. So to give meaning to it also, not just to bring some concept, some meaning, which is very organic also, which you can wear, and not just to look at the surface of it, to go deeper in the material. And of course, body, you can't, of course, it's not going to live forever, but I think it's a big reality that we live all the time. We are inside our body. So I think that was there. And contemporary role, I don't know, I never talk about, I don't know, I can't say the contemporary or traditional, because for me the most contemporary jewelry, or the most contemporary form of adornment, comes from very indigenous art and craft forms. And in South Asia, we have a long history and a very living tradition of ritualistic, ceremonial, um, this body painting, tattooing, and a lot of use of natural material to put on your body. In
Okay.
India or Pakistan or Nepal or Sri Lanka, you go anywhere. I think the way they use leaves, seeds, and the marks they put on their body, they're full of messages. They are full of metaphors, and very. It's a way of communication also, and very beautiful. You cannot just call it just ornamentation. I think they are highly, highly conceptual and very contemporary. So I think that was something which really intrigued me always, and made me very curious.
So it's going to be interesting. You also refer to hierarchy as an issue, but your reference to tradition, maybe Aina a little later can speak to that as well as an important factor. But you also mentioned to me beforehand that in the gallery where you just showed, they preferred to talk about it as something like wearable art rather than jewelry. That's still a fresh kind of conversation there. But let's move now to Amina Rizwan, also in Lahore. And I'll just check to see. Amina, are you with us? Can you say a little about why you decided to become involved in jewelry and metal?
Hello everyone, thank you Kevin. So I'm looking at this agency of a jewelry maker in Pakistan, how on one hand there's that historical implication that is governed by the post-colonial culture, and there's a kind of master towards this craft. It is about a perfection of the skill, the technique, and the post-colonial tendency way of sustaining this craft. And because I look at the immediate image that is generated from the old artisan workshop, and it is so much about perfecting and the desire to be really good at shell at a skill or a technique. It is so much about hard work that goes on between the hand and the head. However, looking at this same context, but in the current situation, I feel like and the thingness of everyday life, it is so much a part of our culture, it is so ingrained in our mind, it is the way we respond to the object, the way we demonstrate our class, and the attitude towards the object, who we choose to invite the people in our home, outside, in public places. There is a display of an object everywhere around us. Looking at this, I kind of think how that the idea of a traditional jewelry making in Pakistan, it has a potential as a culture of otherness. It is so provocative, it is so attractive. When I look at it now and those same object can activate the human self, it reinforces the relationship between the human and the objects. And I feel like we can do all this without losing our cultural identity, without losing our cultural distinctiveness. I think about how our tradition of a jewelry making, it can engage and how we can use it to respond to our current situation we are living in, whether it is a violence, whether it is a domestic violence, the idea of a terrorism, the religious intolerance, and the more private sphere, the intimacy, the desires, and this is where I see that agency and that gap that can be fulfilled, or maybe a sense of a connectedness that can evolve about how we can de-scale the craft, how we can de-scale the craft and blur the boundaries and the art. I look at the work of, for example, David Clark and the idea of his hollowware and the vessel, and it evokes so much that idea of a human relationship with the object, the way he's experiencing the idea of an object, how he's consuming. So I think this is that platform I'm looking at, the part where I feel like Pakistani contemporary jewelry can be activated.
So, yes, thank you very much for that. There's so much to go into with what you're saying, and it would be interesting to unpack the concept of de-skilling that you mentioned, but the way in which you talk about drawing on the local culture in a way that doesn't play into the hierarchy between the hand and the head, I think is proving to be a theme that's resonating now. Let's go across to India now. And Pallavi, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Good. Where are you now?
I'm in Delhi.
Delhi. Good. So as ambassador, AJF ambassador for India, you've been helping us develop this, so it's good to have you with us. We can hear a little South Asian traffic in the background. I don't know where that is from. It gives a bit of local ambience. So can you share with us what it is that has driven you to focus on jewelry as an art form in your practice, and what role you think it plays in Indian culture today?
I think I wasn't necessarily trained in art jewelry, though it was being made in the batches around me. And that is another thing I found, that when the jewelry school I went to, which is Jewelry Design and Technology Institute in Noida, which closed in 2014, it started in 99, I think, is when they had the first batch, and I was the third batch. There was no curriculum of art jewelry that was taught. But I think we were just given inspiration. A lot of the students, I think they were honest. And what I realized was, over a period of time of learning as well as looking, that art exclusively trained in fine jewelry, or exclusively trained the classical?
Sorry, Pallavi, you're breaking up, I'm afraid. It's hard to hear you. Your sound is breaking up. So would you be able to type a statement for us to read while we go to Ina Alawalia? I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
I'm not sure I know how to type a statement on this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So if we go to Aina in Calcutta, you've heard some of what's been said already about motives in and the meaning of jewelry as an art form in Pakistan and India. What's been your focus in terms of this medium?
So when I started making jewelry, again, I wasn't trained like Masuma as a designer or a maker. At least she was an artist. I had an MBA in marketing, so I had no background really. So when I started making jewelry, it was just pure ornamentation, and it was just in a contemporary viewpoint in terms of not contemporary art, but contemporary motives, as in, rather than doing traditional tribal pieces, I did more minimal geometric nature-inspired pieces. About 6 years later, I started feeling a little dissatisfied with what I was doing, in the sense that it had no meaning. It added no meaning to my life or to anyone else's life, which is when I discovered conceptual jewelry or contemporary jewelry and went and studied it. And that's when I came back after studying, I thought, I was full of all these idealistic ideas about wanting to make jewelry that had, meaning and had communicated a story. And so I did that in the way that and I realized that in India, there is no real market for it. There aren't galleries that would show it, and there aren't collectors that would collect it. So to find sort of like a balance, what I do now is I make commercial jewelry. When I say commercial, I mean it's not fashion driven, but it is beautiful. It is metal. It is most often gold plated, and it is something that a lot of people would want to buy and wear at the various occasions that they go to. It's not meant for collectors. It's meant for everybody. And yet I try and, instill meaning or a story or a reminder in each piece. And that story is really what we talk about most often. And the jewelry is just a carrier of the message or the reminder. And most of these pieces are meant to be totems for the people who wear them. So on the other hand, this 95 to 97% of my time on, but say 3 to 5% of my time I spend on making jewelry that really, could qualify as say contemporary art jewelry. But those pieces I make for myself. I don't make them with an aim to be able to sell them. I don't make them with an aim to a gallery to show them, because I know that the time or the effort involved with doing that would take away from, would be disproportionate to the money that I would get from it. So I make these pieces because I need to. I make these pieces because this is where I put myself, my feelings, I distill my strong emotions about a certain subject in them. But mostly they lie in a drawer. Hardly ever are they actually shown. So that really is where the contemporary jewelry scene for me stands.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. And how do you feel about hearing from the Pakistani jewelers in reflecting something of the traditions and the culture of ornament, that there is something that contemporary jewelry can do to draw on that? Do you feel that in India as well?
I totally agree with that. I mean, we can really, really draw on it there. And at the end of the day, I think, I don't know who Sahr said it or Masuma said it, that at the end of the day, we are using traditional craft. I think Masuma said this. We are using very traditional craft, but we're making contemporary jewelry. And also in India, as in Pakistan or the rest of Asia, jewelry is such an integral part of what, you know, of women's lives or as of people's lives. There is a lot that you know, we can draw from there to build the entire contemporary jewelry scene. But on the other hand, like Masuma also said, in the hierarchy of art, um, at least in India, I'm sure it will be similar in Pakistan. Photography has barely been accepted as an art form in the last, like, say, maybe decade or two. So for jewelry to be accepted as an art form would take a lot longer and a lot of effort. And I think the movement would require a lot more, you know, active participation from us, which I have to admit I don't put in. I know that Pallavi puts in a lot of effort in this, and I have to also say that, Kevin, you're one of the first people who've even spoken about contemporary jewelry in India, and you know, you've made so much happen. You've spoken about it to the rest of the world, and you know, even acknowledged that it might exist or it might be beginning. That really requires a lot more effort to be able to.
Mm-hmm. And so thank you very much, Anon. It's interesting to hear your approach as a kind of a guerrilla jeweler, that you work within the system in the commercial way. And I think I certainly recommend anyone to look at the videos of your fashion parades, where you see the most amazing messages that come through very strongly there, particularly about gender equality that's come up before. Let's move now to Aayusha in Kathmandu in Nepal, and which is a land of great beauty and much craft and a culture that people feel very fondly towards. But for you, what role do you think contemporary jewelry plays in Nepal? What part can it play?
I think, like in most Asian countries, jewelry has just been worn as an ornament, or because we love gold, so it's always been seen as an investment. Never, the design has never really been a focus, and people would actually never pay for, you know, designer jewelry or designed anything. It would always be the value of the metal. Um, so I think contemporary jewelry for me, I personally, the only reason why I started or even you know, touch base with jewelry is because the craft itself was dying. Um, so the craftsmen were not. It's always been very father to son, generation to generation passed down skills here, and we don't have any institution that teaches design, specifically jewelry designing. So the primary reason why I started was to touch base with the craftsmen, and then, you know, hopefully revive the culture of passing the skills down. So I, as a contemporary jewelry, I think the main role that I have been able to create in Nepal is the dialogue between the craftsmen and the common people. We've always been export, you know, producers. Not really. We haven't had any design-based jewelry in Nepal as such. So it's only just coming up. So I really think the people who are working with contemporary jewelry at the moment have really opened this platform to showcase and highlight the skill of the craftsman and give space to practice more, and also allow as designers to come up, because otherwise we've never had this space where we could work with jewelry or people appreciating jewelry, none of that.
So that's very interesting, Aayusha, that you're reiterating a theme here about working with traditional jewelry. Normally, contemporary jewelry as a form of modernism is seen as something which tries to break with tradition in terms of reinventing form, whereas here what you're talking about is a way of keeping a tradition alive in a certain fashion. And I think that's a very different kind of perspective, and it would be good to hear more about that. So we've covered a lot of time zones and a lot of different parts of South Asia so far. In the time we have left, it would be good just to look at one of the issues, which is about the the use of, in terms of the way jewelry is named, the use of brands or workshop names rather than individual artists, because in the contemporary jewelry, in the history of contemporary jewelry, it's always been the work of individual artists that are mentioned. I'm interested in any views that you might have about this in the South Asian context, whether it's more appropriate to talk about a workshop than an individual artist in terms of, say, the captions of the images that you've provided, and why that might be. Any thoughts about that?
So one of the things is that in India, in the West, the artist is also the maker. In India, it's usually the artist is a designer, and the maker is mostly a team of craftsmen. So it's usually a brand name, or the brand name could even be the name of the designer. For instance, we had a brand name and it didn't work. People would still just remember my name. So we dropped the brand name and now we just use my name. So I think at the end of the day, it's a brand rather than an individual artist, because an artist typically, even if they have, people who paint with them or whatever it is, it's not like in jewelry where almost 100% is made by the craftspeople. So maybe that's why people use brand names here more than artist names. And in any case, jewelry isn't an art form yet, an accepted art form yet in Asia, in that sense. It's still like sort of taking baby steps there.
Well, maybe going back to the traditions of Lalique, for instance. Obviously, there's René Lalique behind that, but the workshop itself had its own momentum as different designers and different craftspeople were part of it.
That's true, actually, because the thing is that I think because it's art jewelry is a relatively newer discipline, especially in South Asia. So there is this lack of confidence or support for the art jeweler, because not only is the art jeweler, actually challenging or questioning history and social norms, etc., but also the inherent value of the jewelry. So the brand name, I think, actually serves to sort of add more value to it, as well as create a kind of a social standing for the work. I think that is why sort of something like that is quite prevalent in South Asia. Also, as just mentioned, because the mode of working is collaborative to a large extent, and it, sort of the exchange of many hands goes through making a certain piece. So I think it's great in a way that that can be acknowledged, sort of rather than sort of just bringing one person's name forward as a brand.
Can I just add? I think in a brand, what I've seen, normally it is still the designer that comes forward. I think we know the brand through the designer. That is the person that we associate with as and when we do get to know of the designer. The craftsmen are still unacknowledged. And I was thinking of this old, the ancient indigenous work ethic that India has, which had, where the artists, the artisans and the designers, nobody actually stamped their name on their piece of jewelry, because there were so many skills that were involved that, whose name could you actually stamp, which kind of put everyone at par rather than having a class hierarchy. And I think I would be curious to see how this work ethic can actually come about in contemporary times in India, in a way that where everyone is in fact possibly acknowledged, because I don't think anyone would not want to be acknowledged in today's times. So I think a brand somewhere does not entirely cater to that. The craftsman does still somewhere get left behind.
Mhm. Right. Okay. I can see that this is an important issue, and we take this a little further by talking about the impact of social media, of course, which is a way in which, in the absence certainly of galleries, jewelry and contemporary jewelry is circulated. But we're a little bit over time, but I don't want to leave without briefly putting a few proposals on the table, and that's from your perspectives. What you think would be a useful initiative within South Asia to be able to support and promote contemporary jewelry? Is it an exhibition, a publication, a network? What are the kinds of initiatives which you see as being useful at this stage and that people can put their energies behind? Any thoughts about that?
I think any or all of these
Yeah.
ideas would be wonderful. I mean,
Yeah.
they could range from starting with research and documentation into this art form to participation in global forums, fairs, seminars, conferences, putting infrastructures in place for making, showing, documenting, broadcasting works like, sort of like the initiative by AJF at the moment. All kinds of grants, funding, craft initiatives, the engagement enterprises, skill development programs, art incubators. I think there's so much space for sort of collaborations and developments that it would just be kickstarting this form sort of jewelry and taking it forward in many multiple directions.
Mm. Well, I think it seems good that we have the beginnings also now of the institutionalization of it in South Asia, which obviously provides an important platform. Any other thoughts?
I think networking is crucial to the Indian setup, to the South Asian setup. I think also because we have such similar cultures that, and we can, there's a lot of give and take that can happen. There's a lot of growth that can happen there. I think what Sahr said about collaborations is also important. So networking is important. I think a publication is with you. So, but I think what India at this point also needs is a jewelry school that is, in fact, an issue that focuses research and on teaching their students. And that's what we're lagging behind at this point.
Okay. Before we go, any other final thoughts?
Oh, one more thing I'd like to add is that so in 2011 I had to bring a workshop down to India, maybe Delhi and Calcutta, with Peters and some of my teachers from Alchemia. But I didn't find anyone to fund the workshop, and even the number of people who would be willing to sign up was very low. I mean, even when we were sort of just testing the market. So I would say that was of course 2011. It's been 5 years since then. So I would say one thing also that would help is maybe a certain amount of funding to bring down some really amazing people to have workshops here to teach people in jewelry schools. Like Pallavi was saying, we need a jewelry school to teach this, but we may not have a school, but at least maybe we can have workshops in the schools, that could sort of open up the minds of students to this kind of, rather than just, diamonds and polki and peacocks and roses,
Well, I think, Amina, this is something that you're doing as well you just had a workshop, haven't you? Or having a workshop in Lahore.
Hi.
So anyway, I think it does seem to be something which is beginning now, and with sorry, it's a bit clunky with all the sounds. Hearing from you all and your commitment in being part of this process shows how much is at stake in terms of contemporary jewelry in South Asia at the moment, both internally, as you say, reflecting on the post-colonial issues and the hierarchies and the way of relating to traditions and partnerships with traditions, but also externally in terms of the understanding of contemporary jewelry as a thing, which is previously seen within the context of individual artists, but looking and providing spaces for thinking about it as a workshop or a collective endeavour, and one which obviously touches on the traditions of ornament in South Asia as well. So thank you so much for your participation in this. It's been wonderful to hear your voices. Obviously, this is really just a beginning of this kind of conversation, and we really look forward to more news of what's happening in South Asia. So thank you, Sair, Masuma, Amina, Pallavi, Aina, and Aayusha. Namaste, and all the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.